Alright, what's going on, boys and girls? This is Matt here with Dark One Linux Tech and Gaming, where this is the fusion of Linux technology and gaming. And in this particular video, we're looking at why Homeboy here, says don't use Windows, try Linux. Haven't watched it, no fucking idea how good this video is or isn't. Don't even know who this is, to be brutally honest. Enrique, apparently.
Almost a year since Windows 11 came out, but the transition haven't been smooth for some users. From things like getting less performance in gaming to others annoying bugs, now Windows 11 is going through a shaky start. While still Windows remains the de facto operating system for personal computers, it isn't without viable alternatives. The most popular of them is Linux. Some of you may be familiar with the term, while others of you will be shouting and screaming in excitement. So let us talk about Linux, focusing mostly in two versions of it, Zorin OS and Pop OS, and why I think that it's about time that people upgraded to a Linux-based operating system instead of continuing with Windows. For those of you that don't know the world of Linux, let us go to some of the basics. Linux is an operating system just like Windows, but unlike Windows, it's an open source and community-developed operating system. This means that the public have access to the operating system source code, and they are allowed to do basically anything that you want with it. And people have from wacky branches of Linux, just of the fun of it, to actual serious operating system that millions of people use, like Ubuntu. Another really interesting thing about Linux is that almost every major computing platform supports it. From mobile phones to supercomputers and servers, Linux supports everything, making it one of the most widely supported operating systems out there. Linux as well can be really custom and versatile. That is pretty much unprecedented. Linux is used in a wide array of applications, and the applications are basically the backbone of our modern-day computing. From running a server and cloud operating system on data farms to developer OS for making software applications, Linux can be optimized for almost anything and everything. While all of that sounds great,
So far, I have no problems with the information-wise what he's presenting, and he's not wrong about the issues that some people have had with Windows 11, specifically in that switch. It has been kind of a nightmare. I've been using Windows 11 on a workstation machine, and it is god-awful horrible. I forgot how bad Windows has really fucking gotten. This just reiterates how bad it really has fucking gotten. So I have no issue with what he's saying so far. There's plenty of reasons to try it. Might not be for everybody. Totally understandable. Totally okay too. The one thing I hate about sometimes in the community is people shame you based on, oh, you use Windows or Mac or whatever. Use what works for you. If it's Windows, cool. If it's Mac, cool. If it's Linux, awesome too. And if you're one of the outliers that like Solaris or was it Open Indiana, I think is the Solaris open source version, FreeBSD, take your pick. Doesn't really matter. Use what works for you. So I'm waiting to see where he goes with this. I have no idea, to be brutally honest. So going by the tag, he says why Linux. I'm hoping that he gets into a better explanation about why you should be using Linux.
and dandy, you might be wondering, but what is it for me? My computer is doing completely fine on Windows 11. So why I tell you to change, or at least to try Linux over Windows for your operating system? Guys, that is a fair question. So let's go through some of the benefits of using Linux and why a switch may be good for you. To start everything off, Linux is mostly completely free. Yeah, at least 99% of the Linux distributions are free because of Linux is a free-to-use operating system. Linux falls under the free and open source software category. So not only is Linux free to use, but it's also even free to develop for your own personal needs. While this
So instead of talking about specifically it's free as in cost, which this argument fucking drives me goddamn insane. Yes, it's free as in freedoms that you can do. You, as he mentioned, you can develop on it, you can hack at it and whatever. You are in control of the system. We need to market better about what it is. The free application shit is mad annoying because then it's like, oh, I don't have to pay for stuff. When we have these guys that are trying to make these applications professional grade, things like Caden Live, things like insert application here that are trying to be professional, and we can't do that if everybody just kind of says it's free as in price. That doesn't fucking help anybody. As much as some of the open source community wants to complain and the free software community wants to complain, devs got to eat. People got to eat. As far as the freedom portion, control. I don't talk about freedoms. I say you control the system because you do. That's the difference. One is price freedoms. One is control of the experience. Very dichotomy-wise different as opposed to lumping all this shit together because when, it's free isn't beer enough, kind of crap. It muddles the waters. It really does. So control, but not the free part, which irks me. It matters to some. It really does. But for some of us, it doesn't fucking matter. I know I support open source projects that I use. So for me, that's not a fucking selling point because I would still pay for these applications. Not everybody can do that, granted. But those that can, not going to shame you for not, but I'm going to kind of say you probably might want to think about supporting what you actually fucking use. Just saying.
These have many benefits at an institutional level, like for example in the area of cybersecurity, when the compromised operating system can bring countries to their knees. So countries, for example, like China, have developed their own private operating system developed on Linux. For an average Joe like you and me, that means not paying for those hefty Windows licensing fees for every device that you own, and the freedom to make it your own with some.
So I am not a fan of the Windows licensing crap. Like its model is mad obnoxious, etc., etc. I can go months and days into that. The short version is, despite what we will say, price-wise, you can still run Windows 10 or 11 basically free. You just don't have certain control of the systems. So most people, not all, are going to give up a little control for the price. Or some people are willing to pay the price to have a little more control, hence the price tag of Windows. Some of us want a little bit of both or all of both. And that's when we usually say, okay, I'm not going to Mac because that's even more locked down. So we're going to go to Linux. And I'll be the first to admit, when it comes to control of the system and all that stuff, I generically don't care. Like whatever the default UI is generically what I stick with. But that's because I've already determined what I know and need to use for me, which is Plasma, not GNOME or any of the other ones. To each their own with that. But really, just the cost thing is just, it's a weak argument because then it makes it feel like it's a second class thing because it's got that stigma. Windows users specifically equate free with low quality, a catch, a gotcha, or something else. So we have to stop selling it as a fucking free price kind of product and say that it's an application that you control. You want the newer one? Cool. Don't have to upgrade. You want the older, and you want to stick on the older one because for whatever reason it works better for you. It doesn't crash or whatever. No forced update. Like there are ways to sell shit better than we do. And the one word that I constantly come back to is control. You control the experience. You control the system. So I hate when people make this free argument because control is actually a better argument. Because you control the system, you control whether or not you pay for shit across the board. Now you can talk about freedoms and the four freedoms and all the other shit. I don't get into the philosophical bullshit like that. That's just not my thing. So for those that care, cool. You're barking up the wrong fucking tree. I don't. I care about the control which those four freedoms give, but I don't give a shit about all the stupid esoteric arguments between free as in beer and all and free as in freedom crap. That I just don't give a fuck, to be brutally honest. I use proprietary software, open source software. I pay for software. I don't pay for software. It's a novel idea. But it all boils and ties back into that one word: control. You control the experience. We suck at fucking marketing and open source and Linux. I swear to God.
How of a learning curve, depending upon what Linux-based distribution you are using, is effortless to maintain your OS, as the user can centrally update all of the OS and all of the software applications installed. This isn't very much not the case in Windows, where every third-party application have to be updated individually. Another great thing about Linux is that it's very stable. Most of us must have experienced how a freshly installed Windows system runs extremely fast, and that the same system becomes slow after 6 months to 1 year, and we are left scratching our heads like, what is going on here? Why is this happening? And the only way to fix this problem is to do a fresh install, which ruins a perfectly good day. Not only do you have to back up all of your data and do a fresh Windows install, you also have to install all of your software and applications. On the other hand, for most of the distros, Linux runs exactly as fast as it did the first time installed and even after several years. A testament to this stability is the fact that right now, 96.3% of the top million web servers are running on Linux. This is because Linux is more stable and doesn't crash so often, and unlike Windows, you don't need to reboot a Linux server after every update or patch. Installing and using Linux on your system is the easiest way to avoid viruses.
I got a few Arch Garuda Linux systems that would like to have an argument with you about. You don't have to reboot the system very often. Mesa updates, kernel header updates, firmware updates. Take your pick. The argument that you don't have to reboot Linux that much is becoming less and less of a thing. Just get it, like, yeah, there are services that make it so you don't have to on the server end, like Ksplice, that thing, or Splice. Well, one of them, and there's like Live Patch and stuff from Canonical. But like as an end user, nah, like you do a lot more rebooting than people want to make that argument for. Not as much as Windows, like Windows Update, kind of annoying, but like you still do updates. The nice thing is you kind of control when you decide to update, you control when you decide to actually reboot the fucking system, etc., even after you update. Microsoft makes those determinations, well, quite frankly, for you, basically on Windows 10 and 11. More on 11 than 10. So it's relative, but not exactly what I'd call like a strong selling point.
And malware. In fact, Linux was designed with security in mind, so it's the case that you can even find distribution created specifically with privacy and security like TailOS, that you can watch a video of it right here. Linux.
As far as security is concerned, its more secure stuff is more by design. It's a multi-user system boiled down to a single user, whereas Windows, more or less, tries to be a single user system scaled up to a multi-user system. So it's pyramid this way, and the other ways are basically a reverse pyramid. So Linux tends to work better dwindling down to one, as opposed to Microsoft going from one to many. So as far as viruses and all that stuff, most are Windows related when it comes to the ones that focus on the end user. To say stuff doesn't target Linux is kind of a fallacy, and there aren't security vulnerabilities because you have things like Heartbleed and all the mitigations and stuff in Intel and AMD stuff that affects Linux. That's a security thing on those particular hardware platforms, but it's still a security issue even if you're running Linux. There is malware that's been out there. There's been, there's stuff that's out there. So it's a false sense of overall security. More secure, that can be up for debate. I would say better design for security, yes.
Does this by making it so that programs can't make changes to the system settings and configurations unless the user is logged as the root. The root is the equivalent to the administrator in Windows. And since most users don't need to log as root for most of their work, by design they can't do much damage to their system because they don't have access to do in the major system changes. The mostly that a virus can do is to damage some of your personal files. Also, Linux is compatible with lots of different systems and don't require TPM 2.0 or Secure Boot to be able to enjoy in an older hardware. The first thing that comes in the mind to somebody that have heard a little bit about Linux is that this is somehow an OS that is limited to geeks, nerds, and to coders. But guys, contrary to that belief, Linux has now become very user-friendly. It had almost the same graphical user interface and functionality as Windows-based systems. This is especially true for Linux distributions like SolinOS and PopOS. They are both offer Windows-like UI and functionality, but on a Linux system. So no, switching into Linux doesn't mean that you will be using your operating system by writing code in a green color with a black background, or that you're looking to your screen like the Matrix. Linux.
No, you can do that if you want, but you're not wrong. It is much more user-friendly than people have the 20 or 30-year-old stigma of it's all TTY and all the other shit. But some of that stigma, I'm going to say, kind of self-inflicted. We really look at our man pages, copy and paste these commands from the internet. With the irony, we tell them, don't copy and paste random commands from the internet. So the man pages don't exactly quantify the perception that it's gotten easier, because all we show from the help forums is TTY commands and, go into the terminal and type this stuff in. Dump reports are great, but that shouldn't be the default. If someone's having an issue with X, Y, or Z that can be done in the GUI, we should probably be showing them how to do it in the fucking GUI. Especially if you're going to call yourself a beginner-friendly distro. That one always fucking gets me. So annoying. We're beginner-friendly. Oh, type all these fucking commands into the terminal. That's not beginner-friendly there, chode boy. But you're right. At the end of the day, Linux is much more user-friendly than people give it credit for.
Pretty functions and works like every Windows-based system or even macOS. Almost all of your favorite applications run on Linux. And in the rare cases where some of the applications that you want to use can only run on a Windows system, well, Linux have been given a solution for that. You can download a Windows emulator like Wine and use that to run that application on a Linux system. When Linux was very limited,
you have the possibility to make that Windows application work on Linux. Possibility and can are two very different things. Very, very different. When it comes to Windows-specific apps, depending on the app, I will generically tell people, look, if you want to go full bore on Linux, but you still have these certain things you need on Windows, it's either you have one of two choices. You can either go full, stay in Windows. That's always an option, a valid option. That's your choice as a user. You're choosing your personal computing experience, hence PC, personal computer. But for me, I will either recommend VMs and kind of give them just go here and click this button as much as you can. That way, they can just do whatever they need. Or you have things like was it seamless mode in VirtualBox, and I think there's something similar in VMware. So stuff like that allows them to still have that kind of Windows-esque safety net. I never make the recommendation of dual booting because generically when Windows updates, it usually fucks up the dual boot a little too much to be not of a concern. I haven't had that issue so much with Linux updates, but goddamn Windows. Yep. Oh, you got it. Oh, there's something else on here. There you go. Fuck off. It's kind of what they do. But so yeah, like that's a fair assessment, I think, though.
A few years ago, today a computer running it can be almost indistinguishable from a computer running Windows. And even if you find yourself stuck on anything, the Linus community is really friendly. And with millions of tutorials and guides online, fixing anything is a breeze. For all the gamers among you, you might be wondering.
It's not always much of a breeze as people seem to think. Example, I have a gateway system that's a Ryzen, but it uses a Realtek chipset. So in order, you have to do process of elimination. While I got info on the style of Realtek that it used, like the product number, essentially, when you search for that, like in the AUR for what I had to use, you have about 8 different options. So it's a trial by error kind of deal. Fun times. So it's not always as easy as people seem to make it out to be. It's not horrible. It's no different than when you run into some serious issues with Windows and you're trying to figure out what the fuck to fix. The open nature of the system also tends to help a little more because you can dump stuff that you really don't care about in those dump files. Microsoft really doesn't give you much of a fucking option about what they're gonna really do. So again, control. So yes and no. As far as the community, I am not a spokesman for this community. I am probably the ass opposite person to be anything of a representative of this community. Only on the simple reason that I take a very, very far different stance than most of the traditional Linux spokespeople. There are people, the talking heads, essentially, that you'll generically see. So mine is a much more pragmatic take on things. So I'm a douche, I'm an asshole, and I'm vulgar as fuck. I'll be the first to admit it. But there are those in the community that are very willing to help, that are tremendously nice, and that are a great resource and a great level of knowledge. So just my take there.
Wondering what it means to switch to Linux for someone that likes to enjoy PC games. While there have been the perception in the past that Linux is not gamer friendly, well guys, in reality, that is really far from the truth. A lot of games are designed for both Windows and Linux, so you can easily run those games, and in the case that a game that isn't available on Linux, you can just use one application like Play on Linux to run the Windows version of that game on your system. And also now guys, with Steam, and they're developed for the Steam Deck, that they are working really hard to improve the compatibility of titles for Linux. You can even find...
I will say that is a fallacy argument that both platforms are not developed for. Everything targets Windows. Doesn't target it well, given depending on the port. It doesn't target it well. What we're finding now, as far as the targeting of Linux, is it's targeting Proton, which, honestly, as a gamer and user, bruh, I'm gonna be real. I don't care what Magic Symphony you make it to make the shit work. It's on my native platform and it's supported. I don't give a shit if it's, the binary is not a deb or a .sh or whatever, and not using my own locally stored libraries and blah, blah. Like, I don't give a shit. What I give a shit is, does it work on my system, and does it have that official support? If the answer is yes, don't fucking care. So you're right about Proton. Cool. Awesome. I never, ever, 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 for the love of fucking God, ever recommend play on Linux. I don't recommend bottles. I don't recommend, literally, I will recommend, I don't even recommend Lutris. Lutris is a very situational recommendation. Steam and Heroic. It covers 3 of your major stores. Lutris is literally for only, it should be only for things that are, you know, the World of Warcraft kind of shit or that style of stuff. Very situational. We use it as a catch-all. I recommend the native ones because the developers use the fucking platform, so they are familiar with the fucking platform. When you start doing like EGS through Lutris, you're introducing all the Windows bullshit, which whatever, I don't generically care about the magic that makes it work and why I'm not a big native versus, you know, Proton kind of stuff. In this particular case, it's different because the developers of those apps are actually using the fucking platform, whereas any update from, you know, EGS or GOG are specifically designed for Windows. So those are going to generically potentially break the install scripts, break the client, etc. Whereas at least the clients on this end that we have can be fixed by people who are actually eating their own goddamn dog food. And that's why I highly tend to not recommend Lutris and bottles and all the other stuff. There is a difference in what software. I don't care about the magic. And it might seem hypocritical, but generically, I'll tell you the reason what it really boils down to is there are games that were natively developed for Linux that just don't fucking work anymore. That I literally have to use Proton in order for them to work now. That's some bullshit. So I'm just saying, like, there's a very valid reason to care about native to an extent, but there's also a reason at the end of the day to not care about the magic that makes this shit work. So, catch-22. My problem is when those third-party apps or third-party launchers update the Windows version, bricks the install you say you have on your Linux system, and then go and, you know, how long are you going to wait for a new install script? Whereas at least the app that is being developed on Linux will have that clear-cut communication about what's broken, how to fix it, or potentially that they're working on fixing it and when you can expect it. That to me is much, much better than waiting on a random script that somebody's going to make after they, you know, figure out what's broken from an update from a Windows specific developed app. That's the difference. Games as a whole, they're inter-fucking-tainment. So it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I know that's the unpopular opinion, but to me it doesn't fucking matter. Like, I would not care if, like, Reaper, as an example, for a long, long time was a wine app, essentially. I'm totally cool with that because at least it's officially supported. They're working on a native app, but I think it's still cool that even if it's not like built in native, they were making sure it worked on the fucking platform. The other guys don't give a shit. Valve and the EGS guys, Valve, Heroic, Legendary, those guys give a shit about the platform. Epic and GOG, they don't give a shit. The fucking platform can go burn in hell for all they care. It's under their radar, they don't care. The other guys do. That's the difference.
Find gaming-specific distros that they are light on the resources of your PC to give you all the use to the game that you want to play. If you don't know where to start, like I mentioned, a couple of Linux distributions, like for example Zorin OS, Pop! OS, and Ubuntu. You may be wondering what these are and what distribution is. A Linux distribution is an operating system that is built on the Linux kernel, so that OS on the backend works like a Linux system, but on the user side, it will be a little bit different. Zorin OS and Pop! OS are two pretty popular Linux distributions. For someone starting out in the world of Linux, installing any of these should be a way to go. Steam games support both Zorin OS and Pop! OS, so you don't have to worry about choosing the wrong OS for a game either. The best part, guys, is that both Zorin OS and Pop! OS offers free and regular updates on the operating system. This means that it's not only secure but stable. And the best part is that both of them, they are also made with beginners in mind. So you can have an easy transition into the Linux ecosystem. While there are dozens of other Linux-based operating systems floating around the internet, I will recommend these two. You won't go wrong with either one of these. And if you are still not sure that you want to do a complete change into Linux, don't worry, because most of the distros can be installed into a USB stick or a...
As far as distro recommendations, well, I tend to not make blanket distro recommendations. Just gonna say, personally for me, that's my take. I tailor distro recommendations to a specific person, what they're looking for, etc., their skill level, blah, blah, blah. That's how I do distro recommendations. Pop! OS is not a bad place to start. Ubuntu, Linux Mint, there's a ton of distros that you can look at that cater specifically to the new user. Some better than others. And some of that is going to come down to what that person's skill level is, that person's willingness to adapt and learn, etc. So while I understand what you're saying, I also have a hard time also making those blanket recommendations. I would offer that the community tailor distro recommendations to the machine, to the use, to the person. That's my recommendation.
External hard drive, so you can boot into it to test it and to use it for some time before you made up your mind. Or you can use a software inside of Windows like VirtualBox to run a virtual machine with your desired Linux distribution, or you can even test lots of different ones without making any definitive changes to your PC. So guys, if
live USBs are your friend. Doesn't brick the system, lets you try it, and if it's not for you, and it gives you a rough idea if the hardware works, etc., etc., etc. So I definitely recommend going that route before even just unknowingly deciding to nuke and pave your machine. And then you're stuck one way or the other. You're going back to your prior OS and having to do with that reinstall, or you're stuck with the OS that you apparently were trying to just test, and well, now it's actually on your machine. So live USB is definitely yes.
If you're tired of the Windows box and looking to switch things up a little bit, Linux is the way to go. Even if you have an old laptop or a really old system lying around that you don't use anymore, it will be an amazing experience for you to start learning the Penguin ecosystem. If you guys are more interested into the subject and you are looking for anything in particular that you want to know, just leave me a comment. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video and you want to see more content like this one, subscribe and drop a like on the video if you find it useful. This really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks once more for watching, my friends, and like always, see you on the next time. Bye bye.
All right, so short version, other than, you could almost call it semantics, I would call it marketing. It's personal differences and kind of too authoritative on the, I don't want to say the recommendations, the ability to do that Linux is able to do certain things. As an example, like when he mentioned about wine, can potentially, possibly, very different than 100%. So overselling, like that's the biggest thing I take an issue with a lot of these kind of. It's overselling the capabilities and overinflating the expectations of somebody coming to the platform. We have to be real about the pros and cons of the platform. If you are an Adobe person, this is not the platform for you if you are basically riding fucking Adobe's dick. If that is your style of content creation and your workflow and you refuse to go away from it, but for some fucking reason you're over here trying to play with Linux, if you do not have an open mind to trying the alternatives, not replacements, fucking alternatives, you will fail in that switch. Gonna be real. Adobe will not be on Linux. What it is. So shit like that. Again, and we can talk semantics about the marketing and that kind of stuff about free and beer, free and freedom, blah blah blah. That's a community argument. That's not an essential argument, but it's an argument that needs to be had because we put too much emphasis on it, and it confuses and muddies the waters about what it is. Because the people that are coming to the platform that are new, not us that have been in the community, that are new, free to them is lesser quality or some type of restriction when it comes to the price. And that we don't want the fucking optics to make it look like that's what it means, because that's not what it means. There's fan-fucking-tastic open source projects / products that are better than their, commercial relatives. I would argue, you could argue that something like Darktable or Raw Therapy are equivocal to something like Lightroom. Not the integration of all the stuff that Lightroom and all the Adobe stack gives you. I'm talking just application to application. It's similar in its capabilities. The workflow and all the other shit, that's going to be different. Again, willingness to adapt and learn and open-minded and all the other shit that I always talk about. So there are recommendations that try it. If you have an old machine, try it. If you have, live USB, totally agree there too. Gaming on Linux is actually a thing now. There's 9,000 plus playable or verified titles for the deck if you own one. That's not counting the shit that you can play that's unsupported, because Lord knows like half the shit on my deck is actually unsupported titles. So totally agree with that. We got to stop overselling, because what we're going to end up doing is under-delivering. And we're just going to make the people go back to what they already know, where they basically are going to be in their comfort zone and know what to expect. That's what I really have to say. So it's like a 50-50 with this. I'm not going to yell, scream, and argue with a lot of the stuff that he says, but generically, content-wise, I've watched far, far worse videos than this. So other than that, I will catch you guys on the flip. Inigala, Patreon, all that jazz is down below. Comment, rate, subscribe, and all that junk that YouTube wants, because, algorithm and all that crap. I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.